Ferrari just had one of the most frustrating qualifying sessions of the entire season because Lewis Hamilton actually did his job perfectly, and the car still failed. That is what makes the tension inside Maranello so dangerous right now. Hamilton outqualified Charles Leclerc in Canada. He extracted almost everything possible from the SF-26. He looked aggressive, confident, completely alive around a circuit where he has dominated multiple times in his career. But despite all of that, Ferrari still ended sprint qualifying more than 3/10 behind Mercedes. In modern Formula One, that gap is enormous. And while George Russell and Kimi Antonelli locked out the front row for Mercedes, Ferrari was left staring at another terrifying reality. The drivers may no longer be the problem. The SF-26 might be. Because underneath the surface of this weekend is a technical crisis that could completely destroy Ferrari's season if they do not solve it quickly. A broken correlation problem between the simulator and the real car. Failed upgrades from Miami. Engineers no longer trusting their own development tools. And one brutal Hamilton quote that reportedly shook Maranello from the inside. The Ferrari simulator is useless. And after Canada's sprint qualifying, that sentence suddenly looks even more dangerous than before. The first warning signs appeared before sprint qualifying even started, and most fans watching probably missed them completely. Because while the timing screens showed Ferrari inside the top positions early in practice, the real story was hidden underneath the surface. The gap to Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton finished third in the only practice session. Charles Leclerc was fourth. On paper, that sounds encouraging, but the reality was brutal. Hamilton was almost 7/10 slower than Kimi Antonelli's Mercedes. Leclerc was nearly a full second behind. In modern Formula One, that kind of gap is massive. And immediately, people inside the paddock started realizing something uncomfortable. Ferrari was not fighting Mercedes. Ferrari was trying to survive behind them. That is what made the atmosphere inside Maranello so tense on Friday. Because Canada was actually supposed to help Ferrari. The Circuit Gilles Villeneuve rewards confidence under braking, traction out of slow corners, and driver commitment near the walls. Those are all areas where Lewis Hamilton historically thrives. And you could see it immediately. Hamilton looked aggressive from the first laps. Calm under braking, confident attacking the curbs. Much more connected to the circuit than he had looked during several earlier weekends this season. That matters because one of the biggest stories inside Ferrari right now is the growing disconnect between the SF-26 and the drivers trying to extract performance from it, especially after Miami. According to the report, Ferrari introduced a major upgrade package in Miami focused on the rear of the car, including diffuser changes, blown exhaust concepts, and airflow redistribution around the side pods. The problem is, the upgrades did not behave the way Ferrari expected, and that triggered one of the biggest technical crises inside the team in recent years. Correlation failure. Now that sounds extremely technical, but the idea is actually simple. Imagine practicing a video game on a simulator for months, then entering the real game and discovering the controls behave differently every time you touch them. That is basically what Ferrari engineers are experiencing right now. The simulator data says one thing. The real car does something else entirely. And in Formula One, that becomes catastrophic very quickly, because teams depend on simulation tools for almost everything. Aerodynamics, setup changes, suspension behavior, tire preparation, energy deployment. If the simulator lies to you, development becomes guesswork. That is exactly why Hamilton's comment after Miami sent shockwaves through Ferrari. The Ferrari simulator is useless. That was not emotional frustration. That was a 7-time world champion publicly exposing a structural problem inside one of the biggest teams in motorsport history. And the consequences are now becoming visible on track. According to former Ferrari engineer Rob Smedley, when correlation breaks between the simulator and reality, teams are forced into reverse engineering instead of proper development. In simple terms, Ferrari is no longer moving forward efficiently. Now they are spending time trying to understand why previous upgrades failed in the first place. That changes everything, because while Mercedes arrived in Canada with a radical package that immediately worked exactly as expected, Ferrari arrived with conservative updates focused more on understanding the car than aggressively improving it. That difference in philosophy became painfully obvious during qualifying runs. Mercedes looked decisive. Ferrari looked cautious. And this is where the internal tension inside the team becomes impossible to ignore, because Lewis Hamilton actually delivered on Friday. He outqualified Leclerc by 0.084 seconds in sprint qualifying. That may sound small, but inside Ferrari it means a lot. Leclerc is normally the stronger qualifying driver, especially over one lap. But in Canada, Hamilton extracted more from the car, and yet Ferrari still ended up 5th and 6th, more than 3/10 behind Mercedes. That is the terrifying part for Ferrari right now. When the driver performs at a high level, and the result still looks disappointing, attention immediately shifts toward the car itself. And inside Maranello, people are starting to realize the SF-26 may have a much deeper problem than simple pace. Then sprint qualifying finally exposed the real scale of Ferrari's problem. Because this was not a session where the drivers collapsed under pressure. This was a session where the car simply hit its limit. Lewis Hamilton qualified 5th. Charles Leclerc qualified 6th. On paper, those positions do not look catastrophic, but the gap completely changes the story. Hamilton was more than 3/10 slower than George Russell's pole lap. Leclerc was almost half a second behind the Mercedes. And in modern Formula One, half a second is enormous, especially on a short lap like Montreal. That kind of difference tells you something fundamental about the car itself. The SF-26 is not simply missing tiny details anymore. It is missing confidence. And confidence is everything around the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. This track rewards drivers who are willing to attack braking zones aggressively and commit to corners inches away from concrete walls. The moment a driver hesitates, lap time disappears instantly. But here is what made Friday so painful for Ferrari. Hamilton actually looked confident. He attacked the curbs aggressively, braked later than expected, looked much more connected to the circuit than during several earlier weekends this season. That is why the internal comparison with Leclerc became such an important story. According to the report, Hamilton outqualified Leclerc by 0.084 seconds in sprint qualifying. Normally, that would not sound dramatic, but inside Ferrari it matters enormously, because Leclerc has historically been the driver who extracts the maximum from difficult qualifying situations, especially over one lap. Yet in Canada, Hamilton looked more comfortable with the SF-26 than Leclerc did, and that immediately raised another uncomfortable question inside Maranello. Is Hamilton adapting to the car faster, or is Leclerc losing confidence in it? That is where the tension starts becoming dangerous psychologically. Because once drivers stop fully trusting the behavior of the car, everything changes. Braking points move earlier. Steering inputs become cautious. Aggression disappears subconsciously. And Formula One drivers feel those changes instantly, even before engineers fully understand the data. That is exactly why Ferrari's correlation crisis matters so much. According to former Alpine boss Otmar Szafnauer, when simulation tools stop matching reality, teams waste resources trying to fix understanding problems instead of improving performance. That creates a vicious cycle. You develop upgrades. The simulator says they should work. The real car behaves differently. Now engineers must spend weeks investigating why reality and simulation disagree. And during that entire process, rival teams keep improving normally. That is exactly what seems to be happening between Ferrari and Mercedes right now. Mercedes arrived in Canada with radical upgrades that immediately worked exactly as expected. Ferrari arrived with cautious adjustments designed mainly to understand the car better. That difference in confidence became brutally obvious during sprint qualifying. Mercedes attacked the weekend like a team building momentum toward dominance. Ferrari looked like a team still searching for answers. And the frustrating part for Ferrari is that some pieces of the package actually showed potential. The report mentions revised front-wing flaps designed to improve front-end grip for Montreal's chicanes and heavy braking zones. Ferrari also focused heavily on traction setup work between Miami and Canada, specifically for slow corner exits. There were flashes where the SF-26 looked competitive, but only flashes, not consistency. And consistency is what separates race-winning cars from midfield frustration in modern Formula One. That is why the gap to Mercedes felt psychologically devastating inside Ferrari on Friday, because this was supposed to be a rebuilding weekend. Instead, it exposed just how far behind Ferrari may actually be in understanding its own car. And now the pressure inside Maranello is becoming impossible to ignore. Hamilton is publicly motivated, fully committed, and still performing at an elite level. Leclerc is trying to remain calm, while the car continues behaving unpredictably underneath him. And Ferrari engineers are trapped between two priorities at the same time. fix the correlation crisis, or continue chasing performance before the championship disappears completely. And this is where Ferrari's situation becomes genuinely dangerous for the rest of the season. Because technical problems are one thing. Psychological pressure inside Ferrari is something completely different. When confidence disappears inside Maranello, everything becomes heavier. Every bad session feels larger. Every missed opportunity creates noise. Every internal doubt grows faster than it would inside almost any other team. And after sprint qualifying in Canada, the pressure suddenly exploded in multiple directions at the same time. The drivers, the engineers, the simulator department, even the development philosophy of the SF-26 itself. Because right now, Ferrari is trapped between two completely different realities. On one side, there are signs of progress. Hamilton looked alive again in Montreal. Aggressive, sharp underbraking, comfortable attacking the walls. He even outqualified Leclerc at a circuit where confidence matters massively. And perhaps most importantly, Hamilton himself sounded motivated before the weekend. According to the report, he completely rejected retirement rumors and made it clear he still sees himself competing for years. That matters psychologically inside Ferrari. Because if a 7-time world champion still believes in the project publicly, it keeps the garage emotionally stable, at least temporarily. But on the other side of the garage, reality keeps hitting Ferrari in the face. The SF-26 still does not behave consistently enough to fight for poles or victories. And the deeper fear inside Maranello is becoming impossible to ignore now. What if Ferrari no longer fully understands its own development direction? That is the terrifying implication behind the correlation crisis. Because when simulation tools stop matching reality, development becomes incredibly dangerous. Imagine trying to build a house while every blueprint changes the moment construction begins. That is essentially what Ferrari engineers are dealing with. The simulator predicts one balanced behavior. The track produces another. The wind tunnel suggests one aerodynamic gain. The real car responds differently. And suddenly every new upgrade becomes a risk instead of a solution. That is exactly why Ferrari arrived in Canada with conservative updates instead of radical concepts. The team no longer trusts aggressive development blindly. Now they are trying to understand before pushing forward again. But here is the problem. Formula One does not wait for teams to solve internal confusion. While Ferrari searches for answers, Mercedes keeps evolving aggressively. McLaren keeps improving consistency. And Red Bull still has Verstappen capable of stealing weekends, even with an imperfect car. That is what makes Canada feel so alarming inside Ferrari. Because this was supposed to be a circuit where driver confidence could compensate for mechanical weaknesses. Heavy braking, low-speed traction zones, wall precision, all areas where Hamilton historically excels. And Hamilton actually delivered. That is the painful part. The driver performed, but the ceiling of the car still appeared too low. And once that realization hits a Formula One team, tension increases everywhere immediately. Because now engineers stop asking, how do we optimize this setup? Now they start asking, did we build the wrong concept entirely? That question is terrifying inside Formula One, especially at Ferrari. Because once a team begins doubting the core direction of the car, development slows down dramatically. Every update becomes political internally. Every decision becomes cautious. And caution is deadly in a championship fight. Meanwhile, Mercedes look like the complete opposite in Montreal. Confident, decisive, aggressive with upgrades, sure of their direction. That contrast may actually be the most painful part of the entire weekend for Ferrari. Not simply losing. Watching another top team look completely certain, while Ferrari still searches for basic understanding. And now the pressure heading into the rest of the weekend is enormous. Because if Ferrari cannot close the gap in race pace or Sunday qualifying, the narrative around the SF-26 will become much darker very quickly. Not unfinished. Not still developing. Fundamentally flawed. And inside Ferrari, that is the kind of label that can change the entire future of a season.